And please let us conserve the precious time we have.
Okay.
That would be most wanted because we want to do two things in this workshop. Hello. One is to have an introduction by Ingo Leipner, who will introduce himself briefly as well, into the theme's variety, and our discussion will then be how can we find strategies, networking aspects, but primarily perspectives, what to do to achieve a healthy digital ecosystem. So the theme of our conference is mirrored in this workshop towards the operational side. What can we really do? And how can we stimulate a European-wide movement? You know, the Colibri community must grow, I'm convinced, because the well-established community will not support. But we need both lines, the mainstream line and the Colibri line. I make it short now, you understand what I mean. And to use the competences we have, different organizations, different fields of work, that we just put together our best ideas, how we can work for the slow change which may become mainstream in 15, 20 years. So thank you very much, Ingo, that you will be our first speaker. Sorry?
A quick question of clarification. For the ecosystem is figuratively only. We're not talking about natural ecosystems and digitalization of ecosystems?
The digital world, just to the concept, the digital world is now part of our environment. That means of the way the human beings are changing the environment. It's part of our ecosystem. And our question is how to transform the technological environment towards a healthy technological environment. But today, not technology in general, but today only digital ecosystem, because that affects, as part of environment, children's health severely. I'm a pediatrician, and I see and hear from parents on the almost daily basis how problematic their struggle is with the media and their kids. And I have a lot of contacts with schools. Teachers are in desperation. They do not know how to do it. They are not trained for how to handle this problem. And there is no help at all from the authorities. That is the problem. And to give this help, not in avoiding anything, this is a no-go, of course, but to give indications what healthily to do and how to be trained. That is really the civil society must support those who are in charge of the children. And therefore I invited Ingo Leipner because he published quite a number of well-read books on the problems but also possibilities, how to handle the digital world better. And I'm happy that he agreed to give a brief introduction into our discussion. I will then moderate.
Okay, thank you very much. Ja. Ach, ich glaube, ich stehe doch lieber.
Ja, du kannst besser reden im Stehen. Ja.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you very much for coming today. Our workshop is entitled Digitalisation, How Do We Promote Its Added Values and Its Risks for the Ecosystem. As the name implies, we'll be confronting the topic of the digitalization and specifically its inherent risks and values to society. The purpose of our workshop could be finding concrete steps to organize a movement for the healthy development of children in a more and more digital world. One aspect of this work could be debating with apologists for digital education, for example, during a panel discussion or on conferences. In my opinion, it's important to be able to anticipate the counter-arguments so that you can reply to in a meaningful way. In this case, you have to be prepared for a situation you just experience when you travel in countries with a total foreign culture. You don't understand one word, people are speaking another language, people don't trust you, you seem to be an alien for almost all people you try to communicate with. It is like an expedition through a rainforest full of dangerous traps and animals. Am I exaggerating? Yes, perhaps, but only slightly. I would like to tell you my own experiences and observations when I had a speech in Berlin last month. The event was organized by the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung. The title was Teacher for the Future. The focus was on digital education and just on digital education. I was invited as an alien because my speech had the title Digital Free Oasis for Children. The first thesis in my speech was a childhood without computers is the best point of entry into the digital age. Consequence of digital age. I don't want to repeat the whole speech, only a short summary of the main point. The main point was real life first. For example, gardening is for kids a life skill training as prevention for different kind of problems like drug or computer addiction. There are a lot of aspects you can find in gardening. For example, impulse control. No instant gratification as in a computer game. You have to wait till the plants are growing, till the autumn when you can harvest the vegetable. It's a long time, you have to wait. That's the kind of impulse control you have to improve. You learn the capability to observe the process of growing. That's the basis or foundation for later scientific work, observation. Also, the keyword sustainability is important. The children learn a kind of long-term orientation. And they work in the garden. That's a possibility to improve fine and gross motor skills. And last but not least, there's the contact with the nature. Gardening is, in my eyes, an indirect media education. This real-life experience in a childhood is the base for direct media pedagogics or education, e.g. work with digital media for children 12 years and older. But we need first a period of time where the children get the possibility, the opportunity to learn the basis, fundamental abilities and capabilities to be orientated in the world. And then later they are able to learn all the stuff concerning digital media. What happened during my speech? Some people in the audience were able to listen to my speech and they could simultaneously write and send 3 to 5 tweets concerning my ideas of real life first. The outcome is wonderful. You can read it in the internet. It's a good example for the illusion that we as human beings are capable of solving complex problems by multitasking. In this case, listening to a speech of an alien and using a digital gadget like a smartphone. The tweets you can read in the internet is no problem. One was first in German, then in English. In German, statt digitale Kompetenzen zu erlernen, sollten Grundschulkinder lieber Zucchini anbauen, so Ingo Leipner. In English, children in primary schools should plant zucchini instead of learning digital competences. Misunderstanding, a very big misunderstanding, because I said enough real life experiences are the base for digital competences. It is a question of the temporal order and not a question of substitution. It's a question of when and not a question of if. This I emphasized at the end of my speech, but the wrong interpretation was already tweeted round about 15 minutes before. Ironical tweets are also a method to mock the critics. For example, first in German, Hauptberuflicher Zucchini-Anbau wäre auch eine gute Jobalternative für bewahrpädagogische Kulturpessimisten. I tried to translate it in English. A main occupation as zucchini farmer could be a good professional alternative for cultural pessimists who wants to shelter children from the big bad world. What is the source of this kind of misunderstanding? I found it in another tweet. It was in German. Dass es immer noch Experten in Anführungszeichen gibt, die einen epistemologisch völlig naiven digitalen Dualismus predigen, macht mich sprachlos. This was the text of the tweet. In English, I'm speechless that experts, in quotation marks, were preaching a totally naive digital dualism. Aha, digital dualism. What is naive digital dualism? It's a wrong dichotomy between primary and secondary experience. That means a YouTube video about zucchini has got the same sensoric quality as the observation of a real zucchini in a garden. I think to the speech of Mr. Fuchs, who told us the difference between three-dimensional and two-dimensional perception. No? The reason is that the most experience of human beings are channeled by media. That's the reason for this kind of statement. And the consequence is it is necessary to disprove the naive digital dualism as misleading position. Planting zucchini in school as indirect media education is ridiculous. Just a misleading variation of digital dualism. These tweets represent the status in the media pedagogic circles. Digital dualism is disproved. My short interpretation: we use the same words, but they have totally different connotations. We observe the same phenomena, but the conclusions are totally different, caused by vastly different premises. After Berlin, I have really understood why I am an alien lost in rainforest. In my closing, I would like to give you a sentence of the blogger Philipp Wampfler to reflect on. In German: Das Leben ist weder offline noch online, weil wir als Menschen einen Körper haben, der offline ist, und ein Hirn, das online ist. Das war sacken lassen, ne? So. Translation: Life is neither offline nor online because we have as human beings a body that is offline and a brain that is online. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. My first question would be, and maybe we can all reflect on that and share, what possibilities do we have to bring into practice what we know? We know the digital world is part of our life, that is obvious and no one is against. But we also know, if we do just evaluate the scientific evidence which is already there, that it is a matter of when to protect children as we protect them from alcohol in a certain early age. And this is also part of our life. Car driving is part of our life, but we do not let children drive with 9, 8 years or with 12, 14 years. Why not? Why do we think that digital devices are the most wonderful thing for small kids? So maybe we can just make a first summary of those thoughts who are connecting with this final sentence. What do we do with our body? What do we do with our brain? And is it not a matter of when instead of if? And if this is so, what can we do practically to protect our children from too early, too fast, too strong. So who would like to start? And maybe we get up and turn to the majority so that we really come into a living discussion. That would be very nice. That we see one another face to face. Not just stand and...
Okay.
It's nice for your circulation to stand for a moment.
I don't understand why it's even automatic that we can't ask the question why education has to be digitalized. Why we can't put the smartphones away while the children are learning. They don't have to have digital media. It's not necessary until they're older. But it seems as if there's an automatic given that you can't avoid this. And I think we have to question whether or not it's automatic, that it has to be that way. Why is it, as the lady that was talking earlier, that said, too bad, the ministers aren't going to go for it. I think we have to get rid of that idea, that it's already a given, we don't have any control over it. But why is it that the schools have to have digital education before the age of 12? If they can do if they can't learn how to look things up in a library, if they don't learn the basic skills without reading it on a screen, why can't they look in a book? Why do they have to have these skills? I mean, for thousands of years we have lived without this, so I don't understand why it's a given, why we don't even question to begin with. We need to create the question rather than just accept it all.
Yeah. So we keep that question for the further discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Who is next? Please.
I guess to sorry, I don't know what way to turn because I'm
Yes.
But I guess first in the library in London, in the Royal Library in London, I think it says there's two types of knowledge in the world: knowledge in itself, just knowing something, and knowledge where to find something. And one thing that we're very reliant on nowadays is just knowing where to find something by using a search engine or some website. And it makes it very efficient because you don't have to store all this knowledge in your brain, you can just look it up. But one problem, of course, is that one criticism I've read is that the youth especially, we don't go in depth, in substance, precisely because we have the screening ability. So whatever we read it very superficially just to kind of get the keywords, because we look at everything very quickly. We go through an article by skim reading. And you can argue that, yes, you can extract the key information and the facts, but if you read a novel, it allows you to think more deeply. It just develops different cognitive pathways where you can go more analytical. And one risk is that we would miss that potentially if everything goes digital because you just get more distracted. Whereas in a book, you can't just switch the tab or switch the book or something like that. When you're reading something on a digital screen, the problem is you have all these pop-ups, all these screens that come up, and it probably could lead you to missing. The distraction could risk not helping you create these analytical abilities that you get in books, which is one advantage I see in books.
Thank you very much.
You. Phil?
I think the illusion that it's sufficient only to know where one finds some knowledge. We have all the time in our doctor's office. So take a patient who has headache, give him 1 hour of time, and Google is a search machine, and follow up his ways where he is searching, and then you can be sure that he will be. And at the end, he will search about something cerebral tumors. And the next day, you have it's your job to put this all together, and to put it in the real life, so that mostly headache doesn't come from tumorous things in the brain. So. And to conclude, it's the best competence to get media
able,
media
able
competence
or media competent.
for medical questions is just to study medicine, perhaps. Yeah. So to have this overview, to know what is important and what is not, and the less you have this overview, the more you are distracted to a lot of things which don't help you. Yeah.
Thank you. Please.
I wonder, from the area I work, I hear that competitiveness is one of the key drivers, and also economic value creation. So this hasn't yet been considered in the expose you've been doing. And then I wonder, kids are not able yet to express perhaps the malaise they're feeling in terms of the impact. It's also perhaps a generation later on that we all will see the societal impacts. So where and how is that addressed as well? Because the digitalization is pushed forward by certain economic actors as well, very much. And then it's about defining competition or cooperation, defining efficiency, etc. As a concept.
Thank you.
I think that's something I go out from my own experience, but maybe I will reply in a way to what you said, Dr. Megan. So I had a child with development disorders, and I could really help him with biomedical treatments, and most of the information I found on the internet. But I confronted it with my own observation. So daily I took, I checked what I was learning. I checked my references, of course, in the studies, but you can find 100 studies that say one thing and 100 studies that say the opposite. This is the difficulty. So this is why I could really help him, by confronting to real observation. And I see now with my children, they were in a Steiner school in primary school, so it was more or less without, we had no television, etc. But now they're teenagers, so there's no way we can say, no computers. It's just impossible. But I think those games, the computer games, are really useless. But I noticed that from themselves, they go on from, one is interested, for example, in chemistry lab at school, and then they go on the internet. Of course, they watch videos and stupid, silly stuff, but sometimes they also watch experiences, then they want to reproduce it at home. Or another one, he sees, he's fascinated by movies, and he has a whole program. He wants to be a movie director, so he watches how this is done, how that is done. He knows what school he wants to go, why he wants to learn this. And so he's preparing his own learning program, let's say, so I think it is important to try to have the two worlds, the real world and the internet match, rather than just try to limit, so what can you look at or not, because this is impossible. And they are also into worlds that we don't even know or understand, or they match areas of knowledge that we don't have a grasp, because it's all, I can see already we're lost, they use all the programs that we don't. Emails are this is for a dinosaur. Only dinosaurs use emails, it's over. Messenger is almost dead. So we have to give them, I think, this freedom of exploring also. And next to that, I see they like to go to do sports or be in nature. This is also very important.
Thank you. Now, Ingo, would you respond directly, because it was a bit directed to you, and then Ingo will join.
That's in short. So what I mean is, it's important to be connected first in real life. So with your experiences, with your observations in real life. So if not, you get lost in translation. All this stuff that you're confronted with. And I think in the daily practice life as a medical doctor, so you can experience this all the day. Yeah? This is important, and also with all these other things. So gardening, so it's a nice thing, I think. Yeah? And it's important that the children learn to concentrate and to make one thing further. So this is also a quality which you don't learn with digital devices, but it's necessary to handle that data. This is the thing. You need life skills. So I say parents often, so media competency is life competency for media.
Now,
I think
we have Ingo, and then you,
Okay.
you, and you. Yes, we go this sequence,
Okay.
please.
my impression is that the diagnosis, sagt man auf Englisch? Diagnosis is common sense in this room. What I would like to have is a discussion about concrete steps. The question is, have we a political or something like that, a meaning that we can bring into the public to shelter our children better than at right now? And my idea is we need digital-free zones or oases in kindergarten and Grundschule. That's a minimal position, because you cannot make rules for the whole society how they have to handle the problem with digital gadgets. That's not possible. The parents are responsible for their children, and they have we have to accept their responsibility for the children. But what we can do is we can start a public debate about the scene. Don't we need public rooms, public places where we don't have any gadgets, where the children can make all these experiences you have mentioned? And that would, my idea, what the conclusion of this workshop could be, that we find a position we can work with as an aim, as a goal. Yeah.
Thank you. Write it down.
Danke. Ja.
And now,
No.
next one was you.
Don't know
No,
what's
it's you. Sorry,
Wait,
you,
yes.
and then you.
Just developing further, I think this is one option, but you heard what, I don't remember her name, right?
Martin Reichert.
Yeah, Michaela said. I think something else that could be a little trick, but maybe interesting, is let them, for example, watch a video on zucchini, growing zucchini, and you will maybe discover something. Maybe you can show the image of an accelerated vision of, the plant growing. And sometimes it's fantastic, you see on television nature, it's so much bigger, you can see all the details. And then you go and you say, okay, now we're going to plant zucchini. And so another thing is also to say what you see, because the images are fascinating, children, people, every one of us.
Yeah.
It's just say, these are fascinating. Let's not forget what it is in real life. And so if you can start also, instead of, let's say, negating, putting it, it's better to watch it. Just that would be like the added value of digital learning. It would be like, oh well, some things maybe we cannot see, we will see over the year, over the next coming 3 months how the plan develops, but maybe this is a vision of what can happen, or we can see bigger details, or, that could be maybe interesting. But then instead of saying, okay, we'll watch zucchini growing in a film and we know what zucchini growing is, we have an idea, an image, and then we go back to nature.
But we don't need a movie about zucchini. We don't need it for the children. We don't need it. It's just a possibility by digitalization that they offer us this as an opportunity to understand the world in a better way. But it's not necessary.
So write
Why?
down.
I agree
What's
with you.
the reason we should confront our children with this kind of technology at this stage of development? It's not necessary.
Now we need to go on. You write
Sorry,
down
yeah.
what do we need. Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to connect on two areas, one to this discussion here and another to something Martina said. You commented that we need to first start with real life experiences with children, but actually in convincing adults I think we have to retrace the same steps. We have to start with, or be really based in real life experiences and not just sit on the abstract intellectual level of debate. That keeps it just as an intellectual debate rather than a conviction. And to be really convicted, have the conviction as an adult, that goes deeper. And we have to, going back to what Martina said, we have to be convinced enough ourselves that we can be the example also for our children. Because you see so many cases of, even within a lot of communities, not just parents, but even teachers, I would say, being rather addicted to their devices. And, you know, how can we really be an effective leader if we haven't really convinced ourselves of it? Now, that's one aspect. And once we have really found that personal conviction, we will change our habits, and that makes it, I can say it from personal experience within our family, bringing up 4 kids. Of course, that tended to be before the social media time, but still it was television and other things that if you have a conviction, even if I worked also partly from home with computer, but I didn't involve the children as if this was part of the children's lives. I stepped out of that and did things with the children. So our personal conviction will lead to group convictions, and group convictions will lead to an effective change. And this real life showing, having these oases is part of this real life showing, because you'll see the difference. There's been so much written about these, of how children who have problems will go away, as Martina was saying, for a week, and the enormous changes that even in a week's time can happen with children who just have some nature experiences and keep drawing people's attention to that. Coming to an earlier thing with the commercial interests involved, we can never underestimate the big commercial interests. And just the day before coming, I was pulling out an article about the tobacco companies and how 50 years on, they're finally being required to US tobacco firms to run ads correcting years of lies after 50 years, and went through their tactics that even though they knew it 50 years ago, it was first obscure the facts, first deny, and then it was delay by saying, well, it's not actually scientifically proven, and then only after 50 years. And I think, how can we do it that it's not only in 50 years that through crisis we learn.
In Germany, we have a special problem.
Now, we go on. It's a very good example.
Screenagers is has anybody heard of Screenagers? Screenagers is an excellent movement in America. There's a whole film made of this called Screenagers. And every Tuesday, this doctor sends out weekly advice on how to help parents deal with screens. Yes, screenagers.
What's the job of screenage instead of teenagers? Huh?
Screens for teenagers.
Okay.
Screens and teenagers equal screenagers. And her principle was also not to deny it, not to ban it, but to see what's age appropriate and how can we work with our adolescent kids.
Very good, thank you. Günther?
Yes, let me first come back to the basic question, why digital learning before 12? Well, the basic fact is digital is in the world, and the children are confronted with that. And one question which is still unanswered for me is, why are they so much fascinated by these instruments or these for these media. Second point I wanted to make is coming back to your question: what can we do? You know, what can we? How can we should handle that? How could we start a public debate on it? And now, I do think a public debate can only be promoted if there is personal concern. And if I look around, let's say the participants and the organizations who run this conference, do we have, let's say, guidelines how to deal with this question for families and parents as a start? And one of the outcomes could be that you suggest such guidelines are developed, including the evidence which we heard in the auditorium at the beginning, for instance. Yeah, that could be a first step. Now, I want to tell you a little personal experience. We have a grandson who is 15 years now. And of course, he was very fascinated by digital media. And his parents were extremely strict. And he had, in his school time, half an hour per day. But of course, he was very, the bigger he grew, more interested. And he lived in the same town as where we live. And we 2 years agreed that he will come after his school one day in the afternoon to my house, to our house. And when he came, he said, Grandpa, can I go to your computer? And of course, yes, of course, we're not so strict at your home. But then I insisted 1 hour, and afterwards he helped me 3 hours in the garden. But that was the exchange rate.
That was the deal.
Simply by doing it, we do something which was recommended here before.
Yeah, thank
but
you.
I do think developing guidelines with evidence why and how would be a very first step, yeah, to make our concern widen and help people do it, and at the same time confront public authorities and people who are influence the public to explain why we want to do that.
Thank you. Now it's your turn.
Yeah, just because I wanted to check this, because I completely agree that we need the evidence. I've heard, for example, I have a baby now. I've heard that screens are not good for babies. But I checked on the internet, why not? Because I don't have the information, and I wanted to see what the arguments are. Because if you want to impose, or not impose, but suggest some, be it regulation or some good practices, we need to have evidence, indeed. So you need to basically say screen time is bad for babies up to the age of 3, or whatever that age limit is, and these are the reasons why. And this is something I wanted to understand. You know, they say that, for example, they could become too dependent on them, or the child, you know, because they're fascinated because of the shiny colors and you know, the vivid colors is just something that is attractive. I guess it works the same for adults, and maybe the access to just a lot of content. But I'm sure that there are arguments for and against, and it's just basically saying why is digitalization good and what is it not good for. What comes to mind is there's already about 12 types of intelligence that psychologists identify. And I'm sure that digitalization can help develop many of these types of intelligence. You know, geospatial intelligence, mathematical intelligence, and logic, this can all be developed thanks to digital, well, what's on the screen. But you cannot develop nature intelligence, understanding ecosystems, or even feeling the taste of a zucchini. Watch as many YouTube videos as you want, but you cannot actually taste the zucchini, no matter how many explanations you see on the screen. So there are some things you can achieve with digitalization, and some that you cannot. This needs to be shown, and I imagine that both need to be done, because some digitalization is much more effective for some kinds of learning than you know, doing it manually. Of course, I can go to the library and look for a book, but it's so much easier if I just type it in and I get exactly the same information, provided that I use it in the same way. even video games, for example, someone mentioned that they're stupid. I was young when the computer revolution started in the 90s. I was a child back then, and I started playing games. It was one of the first video games at the age of 6. And I played until 16 maybe. I was an active gamer, you could say. And I felt that it taught me a lot because some games are full of puzzles, there are a lot of cognitive challenges, and I always feel that video games help a lot for development. So I guess it's a matter of identifying what it helps for and what it doesn't, and setting either an age limit or like a no screen zone, no screen time. Basically saying this is time only for books or no screens from this time to that time, and the reasons why.
Yeah, thank you. Now David, and then you.
You can go first if you wish.
No,
Yeah,
no, you were first.
Very quickly on that. That's all. Doesn't take much time.
That's what I mean.
There are guidelines already being drawn up by Paula Leipner at the ELIANT or ELIANT University, and she and her team are working on it really thoroughly.
That's maybe I'll pick up on that.
More distributed or made available and broader way.
Yeah.
There are also, I put all the questions here in my book, but first we really need to listen what people primarily want to say, and then we come into discussion. So because if we mix all together, then we will not have a clear outcome. Now it's your turn.
With regard to guidelines, Till Reckert here has just also written guidelines together with the German Association of Pediatrics. He's one of the press spokesmen of the German Association of Pediatrics. And we, together with Michaela, did a workshop on the future of childhood, and that's one of the themes that came up, for protection of children from pure early digitalization. But when you start to deal with this theme, we have to wonder, why is Martina Reichert, who we heard this morning, who says, well, my personal conviction is kindergarten should be media-free, but I'm never going to get this through. What's the matter here? And now, but if we think where are our real problems right now in politics, they're completely somewhere else. They're about migration. Now for the migrants, the digitalization is a resource. Yeah? They learn the language. They don't have TVs anymore, they have YouTube and everything, right? So the earlier the languages, and you can say like this, but they learn more German if they have some German YouTubes at home than if they just have Arabic language around them, yeah? And whether we think they do or not, that's just what politics thinks. And also in the kindergartens, they put the children at home of the migrants and also many other people who we're concerned about, because, for example, your children, what's your name?
Richard.
Richard, whatever you did with your children, they turn out okay. We don't really need to be worried whether they watch 1 hour of television or no hours, but we're talking here about the children who are really at risk. And those aren't the children of the people who are in this circle. These are the children of the parents who have no idea of guidance, right? And now for them, maybe it is better to have digitalization in the kindergarten where the children learn how to deal with it and then reflect that back at home. So this is something the politicians are coming up with, and the German Ministry of Education and Research has given 8,000 out of 43,000 kindergartens money to teach the kindergarten teachers how to deal with digitalization. And if we come along and say, no digitalization, they'll just laugh at us and say, well, you're not dealing with the real world, you're not dealing with the problems we have at hand. So we have since been modifying our approach and trying to, so we have now 2 approaches, and you'll see it downstairs. One poster is saying, kindergarten bildschirmfrei, screen-free, but we also have a petition where we have written, kindergarten bildschirmsicher, screen-safe. And maybe and we talked about this with Martina Reichert after her lecture, and she agreed with us that going for screen safe is probably a better option. And we could say for all the lot of kindergartens who really want to go bildschirmfrei, screen free, fine, we can make a logo and the teachers know if I put my child in there, they're free. But maybe there are lots of other children in kindergartens and parents who want to pick up the challenge in a different way, and then you can say, bildschirmsicher, screen safe. Now I'm telling this now because I would like to know, how do we bring this out without following, you have much more experience than I do. I'm new to this area. Michaela has a lot of experience. How do we bring this into politics and not, excuse me for saying this, but remake all the same mistakes which you may have already made? What language do we need to use? What things do we need to avoid saying to not come up with zucchini Twitters?
Yeah.
And this would be a discussion I would be interested in, first. And second, we can also distribute the petition we have for you to sign if you want, or Michaela can tell us how to best deal with that. But I would really be interested in, if we want to advance something like this and get 1 million signatures, we're not going to get 1 million signatures for screen free, but we could be for screen safe by saying the ethically we're the experiment. What do we need to do?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
I don't think this is an issue of whether or not you get no Twitters against you. I don't think this is the issue.
No, it's good.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Actually, maybe we should all get more.
No. What I'm trying to say is I'm a very avid user of a computer as a tool. I'm an artist and I can do all kinds of representation. For years I was a computer programmer. And I love the computer as a tool. But I think we need to define how a computer is supposed to be used.
Yeah.
And we don't need to define it to children, because they don't. Children, they need to have more experience in the real world, interactions, just like what the doctor, the psychiatrist is trying to give this information about. We need to talk about the dangers of not only digitalization, but also the EMFs that are coming out of the computer. The children are exposed to all these electromagnetic frequencies. What about the question that the other man brought up was, who is behind what's on the computer? Can you open one screen that doesn't have advertisements all over it, that the children don't click to? I mean, there are many, many issues involved with why you would want a child. I personally kept my son away from all the games, and I'm very happy because I knew at the time, it was very easy.
exposure prophylaxis.
I just said you're not having one in the home, but you know what? They use those games to promote the war games and the war in, the drones and everything like that. That's how they use the gamers to do that type of work, and I knew that was going to come about before. And my son grew up in the 70s, so before there was even the computers. Now I love computers, but I use them for work, and I think that we need to be very clear about what the purposes are and the dangers of computers. And you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It can be used for entertainment. It can be used for work, for research, and for many different things. But if we do not at first give the real evidence of what the dangers are and the purposes, and try to put it into the proper perspective rather than just a free-for-all, because that's what these children have. They have a free-for-all as soon as they have these computers in their hands. And believe me, they do get beyond a lot of the blocks and the pornography. And that is a real danger to children. And you can look at it all over the internet. There are men all over the place that are struggling with this addiction and the other addictions that are involved. So I think we need to be really honest about what the computer is good for and what the computer is not good for. Okay, that's my answer to that.
I have a proposal. First an observation and then a proposal. We heard this morning also from one of the speakers that it's very important to discuss the experience with the child. And this is something I can now, because what happens, it's a constant fight. You're again on the computer, you've been playing so many hours, I'm not finished, etc. But when we discuss don't you think, I can feel, or you look tired, or maybe I have a headache, or it takes me a long time to go to sleep.
when we discuss the experience or even playing war games, I think you're excited now, you're getting nervous. So first they resist, but after a while they start to also reflect. So now I have my son, he's 13 years old. So now he says, well, I now realize that when I look too much at the screen, it's difficult for me to fall asleep. He does the experience. And I think that's the best way, because I can say that 1,000 times, if it doesn't really. But if I never ask the question, or make the link, or the observation, or discuss it, without being too aggressive, or just forbidding, then there is this possibility to him. And I think we also need to make the people aware of this. And I have now been extremely militant and active the whole year round about an issue that's even much more taboo than this, because Bill Gates is the #1, and these are the biggest financial powers on this planet. Okay, you can have as many studies as you want. I've been active on vaccine safety issues. I know what censorship is. I can write a book on censorship now. And the only thing that has been working, you cannot imagine what I've gone through. It's something that we did because you can do reports, and then we would go to the commission. We will lead you around the leash with another report. Then they will send Twitters. Some people, some bots are paid to send Twitters on what you said. So something that has worked for very little money and very efficient. Very recently, I just give you an example of what we did last week. It's an international campaign. Sorry, it's about vaccines, so it's just to copy the idea. Yes. But it's a campaign that's on the internet. Well, we could do it on 18 countries on the internet. And
show it.
Yeah, you can. And so it's a campaign to Facebook or other media, and link to it. So link to the image that's posing a question or a statement. You have a scientific study or a case story or a text. So you can have just the image that will shock people or call their question. Maybe you don't realize, does your child get enough sleep? Maybe he's too much behind a computer, or obesity problems or whatever. It's not. I haven't reflected on it. And then under it, you follow the link. It can be on Twitter or whatever. And you will have a text that will say, this study. This can be done for 10 euros, investment. And this so far, it has been censored. I put it in the newspapers, in the free newspaper, the one on vaccines, but they took it off. So this is the only time that really, let's say, there has been strong. I noticed that there is reaction. People, 50,000. We had some of this campaign had more than 1 million views. So the people are interested. And when you have this, then you can say, okay, listen, there are organizations and people and questions and scientific evidence. And then maybe the guys who never listen to you in those commissions because you're infiltrated by all the lobbies, in the end they still have to look at it. Then you come up with your good file.
Yeah, thank you. Good example.
Just an idea.
Yes. Dear friends, we have now 5 minutes left before the break, and we need, I'm sure, the break before we then go into the panel. We got a lot of input, we deepened a bit the gap we had already this morning. Yeah, we know both sides, but what can we do? And I really think it would be great if all those who would like to follow up furthermore this question would just be with us online. So I will send around an email with next steps, for example, the campaign, the signature list, which David Martin started more on a scientific level, that he said we should not start with digitalized childhood before there is enough scientific evidence that this is good, to show the good, really on a scientific basis, because we don't have this evidence. It's a mass experiment we do with the kids. Yeah. And this I find very powerful and valid, and maybe we just send it around in this circle and then you can decide to follow up or not, or to tell us, erase me from your mailing list, so we are all free people. But I think we should really go on with that. Second is that each of you who has evidence, for example, I know also a wonderful book, What to Do, how to give parents advice and evidence, that we simply send this around, that we communicate. Yeah, I find it so important that you say, but I have now the baby, yeah, and where is the evidence and where to look? There is so much in the net. So I'm really happy if every one of you who has something, we should communicate in English or German or whatever language. We can even make a rough Google translation if we need and shift the language. That we just start to be active, to answer our questions and to spread the message if we find this is of value. So ELIANT will for sure do the follow-up throughout this year with some other initiatives. Oliver, would you like also to say what the German Kindergarten Association is planning to do, so that you just have a little information before we go into the break, and then we can, on the personal level, just go on in further exchange.
Well, the last year we made a petition to get signatures to make clear the danger of the digital media. So, and we got quite 68,000 signatures.
Oh, 70,000 almost.
Almost, yeah.
Yes.
And we would like, after now the election is done in Germany, and hopefully they will find some people who do the job then, we would like to bring the petition to that. This is what we would really like to do, and we do not now really know how we do it, but this is the plan, and so we hope that we can do something in the right direction.
Very good. Thank you. So Ingo, and you are for sure also active, and you let us know.
Yes, I can do it.
Yeah.
I can just make a little bit advertisement for my next book. It's written with Paula Bleckmann. You mentioned her. It's called in German Heute mal bildschirmfrei, and it will be a guideline for families for less and less bildschirm use in the family lives. In February next year, you can.
Thank you.
Good.
We will communicate and spread the message, and thank you very much for your interactive participation. We meet in the panel.